Let me just say a word instantly about the Financial Times around sustainability. We, as you know, do a whole series of, well, we do deep coverage of business and business education. We do, of course, a number of rankings, which is a subject we'll no doubt come back to. The FT itself, as you may know, has a so-called new agenda, which is about balancing profits with people, planet, and purpose. We also have a specialist sort of division called Moral Money with a newsletter and so on. So this whole area of sustainability and more generally corporate responsibility and social impact is something that's deeply important to us and is part of a reflection that we're currently undertaking around the review of our rankings, as well as some specialist reports, including a new one that'll be out later this month on responsible business education. And I'll come back to some of the themes and challenges around that during our discussion. But before we go into kind of the nitty-gritty, I mean, I think there's perhaps a little, playing devil's advocate, a bit of a risk here of preaching to the converted. So I'd like to go around our panel first with just a little bit of a sense of, yes, I think probably a lot of people in this room share the importance of sustainability. But of course, as we know, historically, at the very least, the culture of business and the role of business schools, and particularly the MBA, it's the sort of centerpiece of all that. I wouldn't necessarily say it's been the driving force or the demand from faculty, from employers, or indeed the majority of students. And I have to say, even when we publish articles on sustainability, you read the comments underneath from readers, a lot of them themselves who've got MBAs and paid a lot for them, and they're pretty dismissive. So I wanted to just go around the panel first and get a feel of, what percentage of, let's say, the student cohorts that you're seeing coming through, and what level of demand from employers, recruiters externally is there, which is really saying, you've got to take sustainability much more seriously and integrate it. Maybe let's start with Imperial. Paul, do you want to?
I think in terms of a percentage of students demonstrating an interest for this topic, I've seen this growing and growing at Imperial in the last probably 6 years. And that's kind of based on the fact that if you look at the number of the electives that we offer in the sustainability space, all of them are doing extremely well. And every single time that we launch a new module, sustainability related, for example, we recently launched a module on the future of cities, where we look at sustainability, system thinking, and these type of topics. Immediately, we see there is demand for that. So we also see a growing number of student-led activities. And that's, again, a very good sign. This means workshops, conferences, networking events that are organized by our students with a focus on sustainability, impact investing, responsible business, and diversity, inclusive business, and all that. In terms of employers, I probably not fully sure about that. I think there is definitely an interest for sustainability in industry, which is growing very fast. I'm not sure is a criterion today used for recruiting young graduates or necessary for attracting talent in organizations. So maybe that's not the case.
Judith, what are you seeing?
So at the University of St. Gallen, I think we saw student interest already a very long time ago. I think more than 30 years ago, for example, the Oikos student group started, and Oikos International came out of this. In fact, my chair was also pushed by the students, so they pushed for professorships at our institute to cover sustainability. But I think it varies. So if I look at, say, the master's programs in general, yes, there's very high demand and interest in sustainability. People self-select into certain courses, but I recently had the funny experience at the MBA level that was offering a course this spring, and there wasn't enough interest in sustainability, so we didn't have enough MBA students sign up, so we've cancelled the course, and we're now re-looking at how we sell sustainability to MBA students. So there's a little bit of a funny kind of bifurcation or paradox there internally. Clementine will speak more about Oikos International, but at the university itself, we have more than 10 student groups that are dedicated to social and or environmental sustainability. So there's a lot of bottom-up initiatives from the students itself. We also have a lot of interest from the administration side. We signed the climate emergency letter recently, so we've set specific goals like carbon neutralization by 2030. The recruiter side, I'm too new at the university to really be able to speak to that, so you would have to ask somebody else. But my sense is in Switzerland there's not a whole lot of focus yet on, for most companies on sustainability, sadly. Yeah.
So Clementine, the student perspective.
Yes, well, basically I'm biased because this is a student-led organization on sustainability, so obviously it's
Central.
Central of what we do and what the students are doing, obviously. We feel like there is a higher demand every year anyway, we see it growing, and we are unsure how the Friday for Future movement, which was really much into the in the high schools, will impact the organizations, which is only in the higher education system. So we're only with undergraduate and graduate students. And I really think that the Friday for Future movement is going to change a lot of things for the business education and also for us as a student organization on sustainability. So it's going to be also challenging for us, and I think it's very positive. So we're really happy about this. And if we take the part of the employers and the companies, it's something that I really try to have a dialogue with them to really understand what are the needs, because we are, trying to equip students to become the leaders of today and tomorrow. So we need to make sure that it is fitting what the companies are seeing coming, right? And basically, sustainability at the core, it's not necessarily there. It's not what they look for when they want to recruit a student for an internship or for a first job. But what they want is an ethical mindset. And that is really central to the recruitment process. Let's say now it's really to make sure that there is this ethical mindset. And they were saying that before they were not really assessing that during the recruitment process. So this has a little bit evolved, I would say, in that sense. But there is still a lot to do. So we keep working.
Sure. And for those who not familiar, Fridays for Future is what?
So it's a student-led movement of students saying that they want to see a change happen and to really fight against climate change and to make sure that it is taken seriously by all the different stakeholders in society. So the civil society, the politicals, the companies, etc., to make sure that there is a change happening and actions there, really. And those are now, or last year, at least in 2019, we're really going in the streets and really expressing ourselves. But now I really feel like there is this urge to really act on the things we were saying last year. So more and more students and young people are now trying to find different ways to really act on what they've been preaching.
Mm-hmm. Maritza, we've heard already from on Imperial, but you also, of course, were at Bocconi and you were visiting professor at MIT. It might just be interesting to contrast a bit, those three different countries, regions, in terms of what you see as the relative level of demand, shall we say, for sustainability.
Well, I mean, I think I can echo for sure for what concerns the European environment. There's clearly not only a significant growth, but there's a lot more easiness in both promoting, integrating sustainability content in programs. The other side, the employment side, is still slowly, however slowly progressing. My experience on the other side of the pond is mixed. I mean, there are some schools that seem to be able to find the appropriate way of doing this, and it's typically schools, small schools, Yale, for instance, that really rethink the entire MBA, redefined many years ago, 10 years ago, whole MBA, just starting from the assumptions that are the ones that have to do with, stakeholder-centered organization. We have only one planet, not 2.5. That type of obvious assumptions for those of us who are converted, but that are not obvious for everybody else. So I've seen really good examples also in the US, but obviously a lot less spread than what I've seen here.
Actually, historically, Yale didn't have an MBA, interestingly. They called themselves the School of Management, and I'm told that you can now go back and cash it in or exchange and get an MBA, but with your older degree. But yes. Stefano, what about Bocconi? What are you seeing? Critical mass, should we say?
I agree with the previous comments. So I have experience both at a multiple level, teaching at the undergraduate, graduate, MBA starting this year, and executive. So I see a lot of movement and attention at the undergraduate and the graduate, where since many years we have program and we have a concentration on that, not integrated, because the point is that it's a concentration. It is not spread, I would say, strategy in a course that everybody have to take. It's not there. And the lack of competencies is also on the side of professor and person that teach. But the attention is high and the number are really growing very much to the point that now we are in trouble because there are too many people and the type of education, which is active education, cannot be any longer I would say extended to such number when you have 120 person in class. On the executive, I have a huge change compared to 10 years ago. So I feel right now that there is a lot of attention and also the feeling that what you are telling them about sustainability is going to be key for their job and what they're going to apply. The issue in their job and sizing new opportunities for sustainability, for example. MBA, I see a little bit more of resistance. So it's first year at Bocconi. So we slightly changed the program with the new director, Francesco Daveri. It was asked by a student to have a course on sustainability. Let's see how it will be, I would say, at the end of this year. But I have a mixed type of feeling right now, I would say. I think it's where you have a little bit more resistance.
That's interesting. So it's a bit of a common theme. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Andrew. In that, I'd echo the comments that have already been made that we've seen a definite increase over the past 20 years since I've been teaching this subject. We've got more students interested, we've got more faculty interest, we've got more courses on sustainability. So I think that's the good news story. The bad news story is it can only go so far at the moment. I don't think there's the level of student interest or demand to really pull it deep into the curriculum. And I've worked over the past 20 years in at least 3 of the kind of top schools for integrating sustainability into the core of the curriculum. Some of the highest ranked schools on the Corporate Knights ranking and others around sustainability. And you asked for a percentage, right? No one's giving you a percentage. Typical kind of academics, right? We're not going to answer the question. We'll answer our own questions.
We like answers.
If you want a percentage of what percentage of students are actually demanding more sustainability content, 1%. I'd say at schools which are already integrating sustainability pretty well. What number of students are really pushing us? I'd say something like 1%, right? If you have an MBA program of 100, you've got like 1 or 2 students that are the activists within that. But those are for programs that are already doing pretty well, right? They've already got a core course dealing with sustainability, they've got an elective that's dealing with sustainability, there's already enough. The challenge is getting students to think that they need more, right? They'll say, yeah, we already did sustainability. Right? I've done my course on sustainability. What else do I need to know? Show me finance, show me marketing, show me fintech, show me digital. I've done sustainability. And so the challenge is really how do we, if we want student demand, how do we activate it to demand more than what we're currently giving them?
Sure. And George, I mean, you've seen lots of business schools in different parts of the world, including some lower middle income ones. I mean, give us a sense of what you see about the geographical trends. Are there some big differences between the areas, the countries that you're observing in different schools?
So from an AMBA and BGA perspective, we have been, we have created now 5 business schools under BGA with the sustainability focus.
The new accreditation.
The new accreditation. And out of these 5, one is in China, and they're the program that integrates sustainability the most in the curriculum is a joint management and engineering undergraduate program. And I've never seen employers speaking so positively about the graduates of this program. Granted, it's probably not the sustainability that's driving this, it's the mix of engineering and management at an electronics and engineering university. In Russia, the first school we accredited under BGA in St. Petersburg, their most interesting program was an executive education program for management for arts institutions, for museums and galleries and libraries. And clearly, the positive impact of teaching a museum director how to run their institution is enormous. In Finland, which would be an easier place for sustainability, the school we accredited under BGA has been running a master's in corporate environmental management since the 1990s. And their students, a master's program, are very successful in finding jobs. But again, it is Scandinavia, and it is a leading institution. Apart from that, the associate dean rose to work on a river and lands at the business school, which is on a lake. But the key message is we encourage schools to actually integrate sustainability across the curriculum. And then you can't sell this to an employer, but it's the oil that should be oiling the wheels, not a cog in the wheel.
So you've all sort of conceded there's an appetite, but it's not everybody by any means and at different levels. So I suppose the question for anybody is, so what are the limits of the desirable or the possible in terms of really embedding sustainability more generally across the range of courses in your institutions? Is it desirable? Is it feasible? Where should one try to find that balance? Integration into everything, specialist sustainability diplomas, options, electives, core and through everything, even though there may not be the skill sets or the willingness of the faculty or the appetite from the students to do it. Who'd like to kind of give a bit of guidance on, where to focus the effort for the next, let's say, 3 or 4 years? Please, yeah.
Just a consideration on that. So in my mind, we have 2 different, let's say, paths on journey. So one is the technical profession of the Chief Sustainability Officer, where at Bocconi we have a Master of Specialization, which works perfectly. It has more than, I would say, 20 years of experience, 10 in English, the Major is the name. And we have wonderful placement with companies. So they know us globally. So we have people all around the world, from CDP to GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, to United Nations, to companies. They know us, and this is a specialization type of skill we provide. The other story is the MBA, where you are not supposed to be, apart from maybe a tiny number, or the general management, international management program, where it has to be spread and embedded and integrated, and that's not the profession people are going to. So it would be an international management program. So that's where, in my view, the complexity of signaling the value added is much higher. Mm-hmm. And that's where probably you need to, I think that being very, very transparent, that I found a very, very complex challenge, at least in Italy, to deal with the HR department on that. So companies, they are disconnected. Maybe the head looks at the big challenge, but the organizational structure is still not metabolizing that. So they go back in asking for sort of very vertical type of competencies. So that's something I feel. So the integration would be mandatory to me, but not for becoming sustainability manager. So that's even more complex as a challenge, at least for us in my view.
And
Please, if I may. Go ahead.
so I think I would actually push that concept even further and say that at business schools we have a responsibility and obligation to teach students not only about sustainability but about values-based management in general. Coming back to the question about ethics that Clementine was talking about, I mean, that's a very normative statement. How we're actually going to implement that is a totally different question, but I feel that we've done a disservice to our students. You know, we've created this kind of MBA person that goes out and focuses on certain things when they go into the business. And as a result, we now have global challenges that we're facing, like climate change, like social unrest, like all kinds of biodiversity loss, major biodiversity loss. Businesses are not able to cope with these challenges right now or resolve these challenges. You know, this is why we see the Fridays for Future movement. So I think we need to really take a deep critical look at ourselves as business schools and what is it that we should be providing to students.
But values-based management, I mean, that's bold and that's quite existential.
Yeah.
So that does imply, permeate everything, basically, right?
Basically,
Finance courses through to marketing.
and that's where I agree with George's, illustration of it has to be the oil for everything. It can't just be one cog, because otherwise we won't solve the problem.
Well, if I may, kind of building precisely on these two comments and referring to what I said before, the entire challenge can be framed in terms of understanding ourselves as business schools as basically having the same type of challenge that we're asking business to face, right? They have to rethink about their purpose in terms of creating value for stakeholders rather than giving up on the idea of primacy to one type of stakeholder, i.e. shareholders. We have to rethink about ourselves in terms of, first of all, content-wise. As I was saying, basically, there's no logic of adding, in my view, one more course and one more module. There's no question about, once we have decided, right, if the business school makes the decision that we want to be part of the solution, to collaborate, to contribute, to shift the world towards a sustainable society, right, logic, then the question is redesign all the programs, including obviously the MBA, starting from those assumptions, right? So this is the theory of the firm that we're going to teach, and every single course, whether it's finance, marketing, strategy, organization, is going to be taught on the basis of that theory of the firm, which says your role as manager, your role as board is to create value for relative stakeholders. Period. There's no chance. There's no choice anymore.
If I can add to what Maurizio was saying, I think the question about integrating sustainability into different modules is an obvious yes. I mean, can you teach finance today without touching on sustainability issues? Can you teach operations without touching on sustainability problems? I mean, it's a must if you want to do that. But I think it's very important that you basically created the right narrative. And the narrative is that sustainability should not be a separate module, otherwise it's perceived as something different from real business. While sustainability is about smart business, it's about exploring opportunities, about managing risks. So I think it's very important that students realize that at the very beginning of business education, so they can better go through the learning experience when they study strategy, when they study operations. They have the right mindset for that.
But Andrew, don't you think there's a risk, that while certain enlightened business schools might take this approach, others will say, actually this is all virtue signalling and, the core toolkit that we're charging, let's say, $200,000 for in the US is other. And you go off and do your own thing at Imperial, but actually we're going to go elsewhere. Is that an existential threat actually to the model, if you like?
Obviously. I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that everyone has said so far on the panel about what we'd love to see and where we need to go. The challenge is students, the way in which we market an MBA is on a salary uplift.
Yeah.
The way in which the FT ranks programs is on a salary uplift, right? We're not talking about the fundamentals of what's important when that is how programs are marketed and evaluated, right? And so we need to transform the way we think about what is the purpose of an MBA program before that will happen. And that will only happen if the rankings change, if the whole way we market programs changes, and if the business model of business schools changes. We've also got this kind of a sense of isolation in business schools. I mean, it's great to hear Maurizio talk about connecting with other parts of the college here, right, the other parts of the university. Because business schools, try to, exactly right. Business school students are the worst. Try and get them to go outside of the business school and talk to people in environmental science, in sociology, in development studies. They don't want to know. They don't want to know. They want to talk about finance, talk about marketing, stay within the safe cocoon of the business school because they're here to get an increase in their salary, right? So the challenge that we have is breaking our own silo that we're in as business schools, right? We have a structural problem that we are in as a business school. We're pulling up the drawbridge, not pulling it down. And we've created an institution that is not an open institution, it's not an integrated institution. That's not to say there are not wonderful examples around the world where these things do happen. But as a whole, as business schools have emerged and institutionalized, they're not the model currently that we would want to tackle the kind of problems that we're trying to solve.
We'll open it up in a few minutes, but you've opened this can of worms, and it's your fault, and I'm happy to talk about rankings. But so let's just talk about what can be done in the environment to drag sometimes reluctant schools, let's say, into the new mold, starting with accreditation and rankings.
So can I give you a Chinese solution to the issue? I'm not surprised that Americans are not that keen on sustainability by and large, because it sounds like a green ideology, a left-wing ideology. In the American concepts, even the word ideology doesn't exist. They call it world systems. So it is an issue. So rather than trying to present sustainability as this new thing that is coming from abroad, which doesn't work, especially in the United States. In China, they do something very interesting. They dig out the elements that have existed in Chinese philosophy and culture and Chinese management practice for millennia. And for example, three philosophical or religious movements, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. Taoism is about following nature. Simple sustainability. Confucianism is about being a moral human being. And Buddhism is with rebirth. You can be reborn in any other animal, so don't eat your grandmother. So if we can repackage sustainability, especially for the Americans, in the cowboys and pioneers way, and find what the cowboys and pioneers, and of course there will be a lot that they were doing back in the day that was sustainable, perhaps they will look more favorably on sustainability.
Although if you spent any time in Beijing, right, you'd have to say there's a lack of sustainability in that city. Big time.
Things are changing, and Beijing has improved enormously in the last 3-4 years.
I'm going to go into rankings for a second, but does anybody else want to come in just on accreditation and the role that is playing or should be playing to kind of push business schools and universities to do more in sustainability? Is it a helpful or a necessary yardstick? Anybody want to comment?
I'll jump in. I mean, if you want schools to focus on things such as stakeholder form of capitalism to focus on the climate emergency. You can ask them to do so, you can encourage them to do so, but ultimately you have to require them to do so, right, to get the kind of change that you need. And that's where accreditation comes in. I think Amber and others have really started to push quite strongly at this. And it is a requirement to some extent for accreditation. It's getting stronger all the time. But the idea of the kind of transformational change that some of the members of the panel are talking about, I don't think is there yet in the accreditation system.
Well, yeah, I want to just share one, good piece of news. The fact that I don't know how many of you are familiar with something called responsible research in business and management. It is a new, it's an initiative started with some presidents of academies, not only in management, but also marketing, finance, accounting, okay, all the business disciplines. And the whole point is to basically take seriously the idea that we as scholars in business schools have the responsibility, exactly as Judith was saying, to actually create not only new knowledge, but actually to be part of the transformational change that we want to see. And they are launching, in fact, they already have the first global summit with deans of business schools, editors of journals. There was both EFMD represented and AACSB, the biggest accreditation bodies.
And the next summit is going to be where?
Here at Imperial College, right? How do you know that?
I know a lot.
In June, but it's only by invitation though. But I would be delighted to consider any school. It's all for, as I said, the idea is to get deans, basically all the various actors of our system. And this year we're going to also have senior executives from business, from financial sectors, investors, foundations, media, right? So that we can actually together decide not only how academia needs to change itself internally, which is what was the discussion last year, but this year is how do we actually change the way that we all interact in terms of teaching, research, and so on, so that we can contribute together with the shift in the system that we want to have. The fact that AACSB and EFMD have actually already implemented, well, AACSB has already done it, and EFMD is still working on it, but is very close to make changes in their own processes for certification to include the type of metrics, the type of assessments of the impact of research activity, not just the academic impact, but social impact. So that is already a big change.
So that's so partly internal faculty movement around research, but also the intersection with accreditation. But let's talk a little bit about ratings as well. Yes, yeah. Do you want to come in on that?
No,
as well?
go on,
Why don't you do that? Yeah, go ahead, Clem. You go ahead, on both.
About the accreditation, I would like to say that it's very useful for, I guess, business schools to really have a proper kind of rules to follow, and then that helps them to really know what to do and how to do things. I guess that's the thing that is very important for business schools, is to have an understanding of how to go there and what to do, and I think that is a huge help. And another perspective on the accreditation is that not all business schools are accredited, right? However, the top ones are. So the accreditation systems, and we'll talk about the ranking systems as well, but at least the accreditation system for sure has a really huge impact on all business schools, even though they are not accredited, because those not accredited will follow those who are accredited. And the students, they know that as well. And we really want to really make the accreditations take into consideration more and more the sustainability part of the requirement to get accredited, and slowly to push each time a little bit further. We cannot make the change just like this. It's not possible. Business schools are big machines, and we understand that. We are not completely naive, just a little bit. But the thing is, we think that a change in the accreditation criteria is very important to make this big machine to move on, really, and make really a difference in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that you need this push and pull factor. So you need the student bottom-up push, you need the pull from accreditation to say we need to achieve this. But I think even more critical maybe to some extent is how do business schools stay relevant? Not only relevant to business and the global challenges we face, but relevant for the new students coming in, like the Fridays for Future students, which are now high schoolers and in a year or two are going to be entering university. And they may question, why should I attend a business school if there is nothing there teaching me about sustainability or ethics or any of these topics? So for me, it's the same as you would, you need to look at your long-term survival strategy the same way that a business would look at their long-term survival strategy. The external environment is changing. We can see the shift. It's massive. Business schools need to respond if they want to be there in the future.
Very briefly,
if I can add something very quickly, I think it's also very important to remember what is the role of accreditation bodies, because it's not only to set requirements and making sure that business schools meet these requirements. It's also about the sharing of what the best practice is and basically helping schools to improve on what they do. So I think there is this advisory role played by accreditation bodies, which is extremely important, and that's why sustainability should be part of agenda of accreditation bodies.
Can I follow up on
Briefly,
this? So accreditation is a consultancy process. We have developed an inventory of the key terms that need to be integrated across the curriculum, sustainability terms, and leading schools like yours are lucky to have you, because you can tell your fellow colleagues in supply chain or in marketing where there might be gaps. But for smaller schools or for schools that don't have the sustainability core expertise, an accreditation such as BGA can provide the template.
So we're going to open up in a minute, but we can't stop without ratings, can we? So, Clementine, help or hindrance? Ratings as a way to assess schools and provide information to prospective students in particular.
Ratings
What do we
or
need to do?
rankings?
Well, let's talk about both. Quantifiable approaches to assessing the relative merits of business schools.
Yes, so I guess I think there is a difference between ratings and rankings that we really need to understand, and which is not something we are really used to, because we talk a lot about rankings and not so much about ratings. But for the ranking part, obviously it's a major thing for business schools. Like, they all want to be first. There's only one place, but at least well ranked, and that's what drives them, right? So whatever are the criteria that are going to make sure that the students are going to fit them, and their activities in the business school activities will fit their requirement to really move on and up the ladder of the rankings, which is an incentive, but we feel as students that it's also good to have another tool which can be used, because once you're ranked, you celebrate or you're disappointed, and then that's it. But we think that the rating system has another purpose, which is you're rated, you're part of a category, and then afterwards you can do something about it. And that's why we launched the positive impact rating, and that's what I think you gave me the Smitna, which is about evaluating, assessing the positive impact of business schools, right? And we want to make sure that business schools understand what are the positive impact on society, on the students, etc. So once they have this knowledge, they can also act on that. And so in that positive impact rating, we're assessing different dimensions like educating, engaging, and I have here energizing, and there are different dimensions like the governance, the culture, the programs, the learning methods, the student engagement, the institutions as a role model, and the public engagement. And so we launched that in Davos last 2 weeks ago. And we were very pleased by how business schools received that and understood that it could be a powerful tool for them to start working on that, because the students rated their own schools in terms of positive impact. And then from there, they have the data, the schools have the data to know what the student perspective is on the positive impact of their own institution, right? And they can work collaboratively together. The goal is really to bring that stakeholder engagement and everyone to work together to bring the schools at another level in terms of positive impact. And what was really interesting is that there were no business schools in those who participated in this first edition who reached the top level in terms of learning methods, in terms of institutions as role model, and in terms of public engagement. So there is still room for improvement, and the goal is really to make sure that those 3,000 students who participated can be heard. They gave 5,000 very constructive comments, so the students are not just here to say business schools are bad. If we're in them, it's because we believe in them and we want them to move on and have this positive impact. So that's why we think it's important that also the rankings take into consideration the positive impact of the schools in some ways, because I guess that's where we need to go, and as a major influencer of this sector, I guess we're trying to walk the talk and make sure that ratings and rankings can go in that direction.
So what do other people think? What do we need to do about ratings and rankings? Andrew, sure you've got a view.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with them, I must admit. On the one side, you know, rankings like the Financial Times ranking, I think, has had the most negative, pernicious influence on the progressive development of business schools you can imagine in terms of dealing with this issue. It focuses on all the wrong things, I would say, to get schools focused on sustainability, responsible business, and making a positive impact. It's finally got a little sustainability bit in it, woo, like 2% or something, but the whole salary uplift thing is you know, just overwhelms that. So I think the overall effect is almost minimal. And most of the rankings I have a problem with, just in terms of, because of how business schools respond to them. They're very good at managing the rankings, gaming the rankings. And so, you know, I think getting student perspectives is great, so with the positive impact one, but the trouble is rankings based on student responses, the way schools react to that is to try and influence the student responses, not influence what they do that creates a student response in the first place. And so rather than focusing then on their kind of educational activities, they will be much better at promoting what they're doing to the student body, and they'll be much better at connecting with their alumni and telling them lots of positive stories and getting them to say positive things about them. Some schools are very good at that, and I've been in schools which manage rankings very, very professionally. It's amazing to see. They have whole teams of people that manage these things. And I've worked in other schools where it's me trying to just, you know, get something going, and so it's a very different process that happens around those things. My love part, though, is that a ranking like a sustainability ranking is just wonderful leverage in terms of getting your dean's attention to these issues. You know, if you're trying to do something inside the school and you want stuff to happen, a ranking is the best way of doing it. And certainly in the schools that I've worked in, the opportunity of being at the top of a ranking for a relatively small school, you can be top of the sustainability ranking, is like gold dust, right? So your dean will listen to you, the MBA director will listen to you, because you can say, we can get you from number 20 to number 1 if you do X, Y, and Z, and they can't be number 1 in the FD ranking, that's never going to happen, but they can be number 1 in the sustainability one. So that's why I have a kind of love-hate thing with them.
I would say there's a flip side to this too for the schools that are not the small schools. So the experience for the larger schools perhaps, or the top schools in, say, the FT ranking, is that they dismiss these smaller rankings because they say it's not important enough, and time is a precious commodity at any university, and so you pick your rankings that you want to be part of, and then it becomes a political process also within the school. So this is why I think the large ranking bodies, it would be great if they focused on sustainability too, because not everyone pays attention to these specialist rankings. Yeah.
Maybe one more comment on rankings from somebody, and then
just a very quick note. I think that it has become really a key component for. If I look at university like Bocconi that entered in this, let's say, let me call it game, okay, years ago, because we were a national leader but not an international known university. So it has really shaped very much the whole system, also our career and so on, so inside. And that's it today, I would say. So I think that the responsibility on that is extremely relevant on organization like your organization. So, because I think it's like the regulatory approach. You have somebody and you found yourself in a position. I don't know if it was you were aiming to have this position, but of shaping very much of what is the business, let's say, education, and also, well, it is so legitimate to have it or not. I would say that would be a very interesting other conversation on that. One point that I think is missing somehow, in my view, is how much we will take in universities and business school to build the competencies to teach the new, let's say, program. And Mauricio mentioned this idea of shareholder stakeholder. If we go into the stakeholder capitalism, we need to also reorganize our set of competencies, which is something that is going to take. So the urgency of climate change, it's 9 years, 10 years. We will not have time to rebuild our faculties in 10 years. So it will take much more time. And therefore, the pressure, in my view, that's my take. I think that we don't have a lot of competencies on that. So I've been looking outside because I think that sustainability is multidisciplinary. So how much and how many of our colleagues looking at climate change have ever heard somebody talking in natural sciences about climate change? Ecology, we were talking about biodiversity. And that's a small part. If you take all the social dimension, human rights, who is expert of human rights in business school? And how can we build, pathways in business school on this type of topic? Because we will need to have competencies on that. And they are not there. So we have this too, that we have pressure because the agenda is there. And on the other side, we have a long way because this is a huge cultural transformation. So
very briefly, yeah.
Briefly, I think it might be the time to actually rethink about the perspective to create the ranking. Right? So far, rankings, not only FT, but all the competitors, have been taking the perspective essentially of the students. What do they want from from an MBA, and eventually of the employers, business. It's about time that we actually take the perspective. What kind of MBA person does society need to create? Right? What type of MBA element, animal, do we need to forge, or at least contribute somehow to forge? That should be the criteria, the overarching criteria, to then create all the various metrics that for which business schools have to compete. That's a completely different question.
So that would be, I'm going to open this up now, but that would be my concluding challenge to all of you, and maybe it's for wine but afterwards, but the one thing you can say about salaries 3 years out is they're comparable, they're outcomes based, they're measurable, and this is the fundamental challenge in this whole space of sustainability. How do you consistently across schools measure, what, let's say, teaching or research or operations management is actually delivering precisely to provide that next generation of, should we say, enlightened business leaders. But don't answer it now because we must open up. But no, okay.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, the measurement of salaries was a huge challenge. 3 years down the road.
Well, you can measure salaries. You
But
can
it
measure
was
salaries.
difficult. The business group had to organize themselves.
Well, actually,
That's what they have to do.
it's so technical to go, but it's but to me, outcome and measurement and comparability are the fundamental challenge that we all need to think about.